December 8th, 1902, Volume 4. The confessor uses the authority of the Church to keep Jesus crucified in Luisa and to crucify her with him so as to prevent the law of divorce. This morning my adorable Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, today I want to keep you suspended without letting you suffer." I began to fear and to lament to him, and he added, "Do not fear, I will be with you. Rather, when you occupy the state of victim, you are exposed to justice, and in addition to the other sufferings, many times you have to suffer my very privation and obscurity. In sum, everything that man deserves because of his sins. But as I suspend your office of victim, everything I will show toward you will be mercy and love." I felt released from my state, even though I could see my beloved Jesus, and I understood very well that it was not his coming that rendered the coming of the confessor necessary to make me come round, but rather the sufferings that Jesus would send me. So I am unable to say why my soul felt a pain, while my nature felt great satisfaction, saying, "If nothing else, I will spare the confessor the sacrifice of having to come." But while I was thinking of this, I saw a priest, clothed in white, together with our Lord. It seemed to me that he was the Pope, and the confessor was with him. They were praying him to make me suffer, so as to prevent the formation of this law of divorce. But Jesus would not pay attention to them. So the confessor, heedless of the fact that he was not being given audience, with extraordinary impetus, to the point that it seemed it was not him, took Jesus Christ in his arms and, by force, cast him inside of me, saying, "You will remain crucified within her, crucifying her, but this law of divorce we do not want." Jesus remained as though bound inside of me, crucified by such command, and I felt bitterly the pains of the cross. Then he said, "Daughter, it is the Church that wants it, and her authority, united to the power of prayer, binds me." December 8th, 1922, Volume 15. On the Immaculate Conception. I write to obey, and I offer everything to my sweet Jesus, uniting myself to the sacrifice of his obedience, in order to obtain the grace and the strength to do it as he wants. And now, oh my Jesus, give me your holy hand and the light of your intelligence, and write together with me. I was thinking about the great portent of the Immaculate Conception of my Queen and Celestial Mamma, and in my interior I heard him say, "My daughter, the Immaculate Conception of my beloved Mamma was prodigious and all marvelous, so much so that heaven and earth were astonished and made feast. All three divine persons competed among themselves. The Father poured out an immense sea of power. I, the Son, poured out an infinite sea of wisdom, and the Holy Spirit, an immense sea of eternal love, which, merging into one, formed one single sea. And in the middle of this sea, the conception of this Virgin was formed, chosen among the chosen." So the divinity administered the substance of this conception, and this sea was not only the center of life of this admirable and singular creature, but it remained around her, not only to keep her defended from anything which might shadow her, but to give her, in every instant, new beauties, new graces, power, wisdom, love, privileges, and so forth. So her little nature was conceived in the center of this sea, and was formed and grew under the influence of these divine waves, so much so that, as soon as this noble and singular creature was formed, the divinity did not want to wait as it usually does with other creatures. It wanted her embraces, the return of her love, her kisses, and to enjoy her innocent smiles. Therefore, as soon as her conception was formed, I gave her the use of reason. I endowed her with all sciences. I made her aware of our joys and our sorrows with regard to creation. Even from the maternal womb, she would come to heaven at the foot of our throne to give us her embraces, the return of her love, her tender kisses, and throwing herself into our arms, she would smile at us with such delight of gratitude and thanksgiving as to snatch our smiles. Oh, how beautiful it was to see this innocent and privileged creature, enriched with all the divine qualities, coming into our midst, all love, all trust, without fear. In fact, sin alone is what puts distance between Creator and creature, breaking love, dissolving trust, and striking fear. So she would come into our midst as Queen, who with her love, given by us, would dominate us, enrapture us, put us in feast, and capture yet more love. And we would let her do it, enjoying the love that enraptured us, and constituting her Queen of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth exulted and made feast together with us, having their Queen after so many centuries. The sun smiled in its light, and considered itself fortunate in having to serve its Queen by giving her light. The heavens, the stars, and the whole universe smiled with joy and made feast, because they were to delight their Queen, showing her the harmony of the spheres and of their beauty. The plants smiled, which were to nourish their Queen, and the earth, too, smiled and felt ennobled in having to provide the residence for its empress, and to be trodden by her steps. Only hell cried, and felt itself losing strength because of the dominion of this sovereign lady. But do you know what was the first act which this celestial creature did when she found herself before our throne for the first time? She recognized that all the evil of man had been the split between his will and that of his Creator. She trembled, and with no delay she bound her will to the foot of my throne, without even wanting to know it. And my will bound itself to her, and constituted itself the center of her life, so much so that all currents, all relations, all communications opened between her and us, and there was no secret which we did not entrust to her. This indeed was the most beautiful, the greatest, the most heroic act she did, to lay down her will at our feet, an act which made us, as though enraptured, constitute her Queen of all. Do you see, then, what it means to bind oneself to my will, and to not know one's own? The second act was to offer herself for any sacrifice, for love of us. The third, to render us the honor and the glory of the whole creation, which man had taken away from us by doing his own will. And even from the maternal womb she cried for love of us, in seeing us offended, and she cried with sorrow over guilty man. Oh, how these innocent tears moved us, and hastened the longed-for redemption. This Queen dominated us, bound us, and snatched infinite graces from us. She made us incline so much toward mankind that we could not resist, nor did we know how to resist her repeated petitions. But whence came to her so much power and so much influence over the very divinity? You have understood. It was the power of our will acting in her, which, while dominating her, rendered her dominator of God himself. And besides, how could we resist so innocent a creature, possessed by the power and sanctity of our will? It would be as though resisting ourselves. We could see our divine qualities in her, the reflections of our sanctity, the reflections of the divine ways, of our love, of our power, and so forth, poured over her like waves, as well as our will, which was her center, drawing all the reflections of our divine qualities and making itself crown and defense of the divinity dwelling within her. If this Immaculate Virgin had not had the divine will as center of life, all the other prerogatives and privileges with which we so enriched her would have been, in comparison, an absolute nothing. This is what confirmed and preserved for her so many privileges. Even more, it multiplied new ones in every instant. Here, then, is the reason why we constituted her queen of all, because when we operate, we do it with reason, wisdom, and justice. She never gave life to her human will, but our will was always intact in her. How could we say to another creature, "You are queen of the heavens, of the sun, of the stars," and so forth, if instead of having our will as dominion, she were dominated by her human will? All of the elements, the heavens, the sun, the earth, would have withdrawn from the regime and dominion of this creature. All would have cried out in their mute language, "We do not want her. We are superior to her, because we have never withdrawn from your eternal volition. As you created us, so we are." So would the sun have cried out with its light, the stars with their glittering, the sea with its waves, and everything else. On the contrary, as soon as they all felt the dominion of this excelling Virgin, who, almost as their sister, never wanted to know her own will, but only that of God, not only did they make feast, but they felt honored to have their queen, and they ran around her to form her cortege and to pay obsequies to her, the moon by placing itself as footstool at her feet, the stars as crown, the sun as diadem, the angels as servants, and men as though in waiting. Everyone paid her honor and rendered their obsequies to her. There is no honor and glory which cannot be given to our will, whether acting within us, in its own center, or dwelling in the creature. But do you know what was the first act which this noble queen did when, coming out of the maternal womb, she opened her eyes to the light of this low world? As she was born, the angels sang lullabies to the celestial baby, and she remained enraptured. Her beautiful soul went out of her little body, accompanied by angelic cohorts, and went around heaven and earth, gathering all the love that God had spread throughout the whole creation, and penetrating into heaven, she came to the foot of our throne, offered us the return of the love of all creation, and pronounced her first thank you in the name of all. Oh, how happy we felt in hearing the thank you of this little baby queen. And we confirmed in her all graces, all gifts, such as to make her surpass all other creatures together. Then, throwing herself into our arms, she delighted with us, swimming in the sea of all contentments, being embellished with new beauty, with new light, and with new love. She pleaded once again for mankind, praying us in tears to let the eternal Word descend in order to save her brothers. But as she was doing this, our will let her know that she should descend to the earth, and immediately she left our contentments and joys, and departed in order to do what? Our will. What powerful magnet our will was, dwelling on earth in this newborn queen. No longer did the earth appear alien to us. We no longer felt like striking it, making use of our justice. We had the power of our will, which in this innocent child blocked our arms, smiled at us from the earth, and turned justice into graces and sweet smile. So much so, that unable to resist this sweet enchantment, the eternal Word hastened his course. O prodigy of my divine will, to you everything is due. Through you everything is accomplished. And there is no greater prodigy than my will dwelling in the creature. December 8th, 1923, Volume 16, The Immaculate Conception of the Most Holy Virgin. To be able to conceive the Son of God, she was conceived eternally in the life and in the works, in the sufferings and in the merits of the incarnate Word. I was thinking about the Immaculate Conception of my Queen Mamma, and after I received Holy Communion, my always adorable Jesus made himself seen in my interior, as though inside a room filled with light. In this light he was showing all he did during the course of his life. One could see, lined up in order, all his merits, his works, his pains, his wounds, his blood, and all that the life of a man-God contained, as though in the act of protecting a soul very, very dear to him from the slightest evil that could possibly shadow her. I was stupefied in seeing so much attention from Jesus, and he said to me, "To my little newborn, I want to make known the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin, conceived without sin. First, you must know that my divinity is one single act. All its acts concentrate into a single one. This is what it means to be God, the greatest portent of our divine essence, not to be subject to succession of acts. And if to the creature it seems that we now do something and now something else, it is rather that we allow her to know what is within that single act. And since the creature is incapable of knowing it all at once, we allow her to know it little by little. Now, everything that I, Eternal Word, was to do in my assumed humanity formed one act with that single act contained in my divinity. Therefore, before this noble creature was conceived, everything that the Eternal Word was to do upon earth already existed. And so, in the act of the conception of this Virgin, all my merits, my pains, my blood, and all that the life of a man-God contained, lined up around her conception. She was conceived in the interminable abysses of my merits, of my divine blood, and in the immense sea of my sufferings. By virtue of them, she remained immaculate, beautiful, and pure. Since my incalculable merits barred the way to the enemy, he could do no harm to her. It is fair that the one who was to conceive the Son of God had to first be conceived in the works of this God, to be able to have the virtue of conceiving that Word, who was to come to redeem humankind. Therefore, first she was conceived in me, and then I was conceived in her. There was nothing left but to make it known to the creatures at the appropriate time, although in the divinity it was already done. Therefore, the one who most gathered the fruits of redemption, or rather, who received its complete fruit, was this excelling creature. Having been conceived in it, she loved, esteemed, and kept as her own everything that the Son of God did upon earth. Oh, the beauty of this tender little one! She was a prodigy of grace, a portent of our divinity. She grew up as our own daughter. She was our decorum, our joy, our honor, and our glory. While Jesus was saying this, I was thinking in my mind, it is true that the Queen Mamma was conceived in the interminable merits of my Jesus, but her blood, her body, were conceived in the womb of Saint Anne, who was not exempt from original sin. So how can it be that she inherited nothing of the many evils which we have all inherited from the sin of our first father Adam? And Jesus: "My daughter, you have not yet understood that all the evil is in the will. It was the will that crushed man, that is, his nature, not nature that crushed the will of man. Nature remained in its place, just as it was created by me. Nothing changed. It was his will that changed, and put itself against nothing less than a divine will. This rebellious will crushed his nature, debilitating it, contaminating it, and rendering it slave to most vile passions. It happened as to a container full of fragrances or precious objects. If it is emptied and then filled with rottenness or vile things, does the container perhaps change? The content has changed, but the container is always the same. At the most, it becomes more or less estimable, depending on what it contains. Such was man. Now, to be conceived in the womb of a creature of the human race did no harm to my mamma, because her soul was immune to every sin. There was no division between her will and the will of her God. The divine currents found no obstacle or opposition in pouring out into her. In every instant, she was under the pouring rain of new graces. So with this will and this soul, all holy, all pure, all beautiful, the container of her body which she received from her mother remained fragrant, restored, ordered, divinized, in such a way as to be exempt from all the natural troubles by which human nature is invaded. Ah, yes, she was the one who received the seed of the Fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven, and this ennobled her and restored her to her origin as man was created by us before he sinned. Even more, it made her surpass it. It embellished her even more through the continuous flows of that Fiat, which has the singular virtue of reproducing images fully similar to the one who created them. And by virtue of the divine will acting in her, one can say that what God is by nature, she is by grace. Our will can do anything and can reach everywhere when the soul gives us the freedom to act and does not interrupt our work with her own will. December 8th, 1924, Volume 17, on the Immaculate Conception, how the greatest prodigy was the continuous outpouring of the divine will upon her. I was thinking about and reflecting on the Immaculate Conception of my sovereign Queen Mamma. The qualities, the beauties, and the prodigies of her Immaculate Conception were pouring into my mind, a prodigy that surpasses all other prodigies made by God in all of creation. Now, while I was thinking of this, I said to myself, great is the prodigy of the Immaculate Conception, but my celestial Mamma had no trial during her conception. Everything was favorable to her, both on the part of God and on the part of her nature, created by God, so happy, so holy, so privileged. So what was her heroism and her trial? If the angel was not exempted from the test, nor was Adam in Eden, Was the queen of all alone to be exempted and not to deserve the most beautiful halo that the trial would place on her august head of queen and mother of the Son of God? While I was thinking about this, my adorable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, no one can be acceptable to me without the test. Had there been no test, I would have had a mother-slave, not free. And slavery does not enter our relations or our works, nor can it share in our free love. My mamma had her first trial from the very first moment of her conception. As soon as she did her first act of reason, she knew her human will on one side and the divine will on the other, and she was left free to adhere to any of those two wills. And without losing one instant, knowing all the intensity of the sacrifice she was making, she gave us her will, without wanting to know it ever again, and we gave her ours as gift. And in this exchange of donation of wills on both sides, poured all the qualities, the beauties, the prodigies, the immense seas of grace of the Immaculate Conception of the most privileged of all creatures. It is always the will that I am used to testing. All sacrifices, even death, which were not directed to me from the human will, would nauseate me, and would attract not even a glance of mine. But do you want to know what was the greatest prodigy worked by us in this creature so holy, and the greatest heroism of this creature so beautiful, that no one will ever be able to equal? She began her life with our will, and with our will she continued it and fulfilled it. So one can say that she fulfilled it from the moment she started it, and that she started it there where she fulfilled it. And our greatest prodigy was that in each one of her thoughts, words, breaths, heartbeats, movements, and steps, our will poured upon her, and she offered us the heroism of a divine and eternal thought, word, breath, heartbeat, operating in her. This raised her so high that what we were by nature, she was by grace. All of her other qualities, her privileges, her very immaculate conception, would have been nothing compared to this great prodigy. Even more, this is what confirmed her and made her stable and strong during all of her life. My continuous will, pouring upon her, made her share in the divine nature, and her continuous receiving it rendered her strong in love, strong in sorrow, different from everyone. In this will of ours operating in her, she drew the Word upon earth, and the seed of the divine fecundity, in order to conceive a man and God without human intervention. And our will made her worthy to be the mother of her own Creator. This is why I keep insisting on the topic of my will, because my will maintains the soul beautiful, just as she came out of our hands, and raises her as the original copy of her Creator. As many great works and sacrifices as one may do, if my will is not in them, I refuse them. I do not recognize them. It is not food for me. And the most beautiful works without my will become food for the human will, for self-esteem, and for the greed of the creature. December 8th, 1926. Volume 20. How one who lives in the divine will is the echo and the little sun. How these writings come from the heart of our Lord. The works of our Lord are veils that hide the noble queen of the divine will. I was doing my usual acts in the eternal volition, and my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, you are our echo." As you enter into our will in order to love, to praise, to ask for the coming of our kingdom, we hear in you the echo of our love, the echo of our glory, the echo of our Fiat that wants to come upon earth in order to reign, that wants to be prayed and prayed again, and pressed to come to reign on earth as it does in heaven. And as you go around through the whole creation to follow the acts of the supreme will in it, we hear your echo in the sea, in the valleys, on the mountains, in the sun, in the heavens, in the stars, in everything. How beautiful is this echo! It is our echo that resounds in all our things. In this echo, we hear the echo of our voice, the motion of our works, the treading of our steps, the motions, the pulsation of our heartbeat. And we greatly delight in seeing your littleness as you, while echoing, try to imitate our voice, to copy the motions of our works, to make the same sound as our steps, and to love with our own heartbeat. Then, sighing, he added, "My daughter, if the sun had reason and saw a plant, a being that wanted to become sun, the sun would increase all of its light, its heat, and all of its effects over this being, so as to make it become sun. And even though it would not deny its light and its effects to the other beings, because it is in the nature of light to diffuse and to do good to all, wherever it is, the fortunate being that received altogether all the reflections and all the goods that the sun contains would become sun. What glory, what contentment would the sun not receive in being able to form another sun? The entire earth, for many centuries, has never attested to it so much glory, so much love, by receiving its many effects, as this one being that has turned into sun. By living in our Fiat, the soul does nothing other than imitate her Creator, and the eternal sun concentrates all of its reflections upon her in such a way that she becomes the little sun, in the likeness of the divine sun. Was this not precisely our purpose and our saying, "Let us make man in our image and likeness"? To make him, without his having to be like us and carry within himself the image of he who had created him, would neither be decorous nor worthy of a work of our hands, nor would it be power of that regenerative breath that came out of our womb to generate a being dissimilar from us. What would be said of a mother who generated not a child who had eyes, mouth, hands, feet, and would be similar to her in all members, at most smaller than her in all members, but lacking nothing of all the organs of the mother, but generated a plant, a bird, a stone, things that are dissimilar from her? It would be incredible, things against nature and unworthy of a mother who was not able to infuse her image and all of her members in her newborn. Now, if all things generate and form things similar to themselves, much more so does God, first generator, whose honor and glory in forming the creatures was to form them as similar to himself. Therefore, my daughter, let your flight in my will be continuous, that it may concentrate its rays upon you, and darting through you, it may make of you its little sun. After this, I was feeling as though tired and could not make up my mind to write what my adored Jesus had told me. And Jesus, surprising me, to give me will and strength in order to do it, told me, "My daughter, don't you know that these writings of ours come from the depth of my heart, and in them I make flow the tenderness of my heart to touch those who will read them, and the firmness of my divine speech to strengthen them in the truths of my will? In all the sayings, truths, examples that I make you write on paper, I make flow the dignity of my celestial wisdom, in such a way that those who read them or will read them, if they are in grace, will feel within themselves my tenderness, the firmness of my speech, and the light of my wisdom. And as though in between magnets, they will be drawn into the knowledge of my will. Those who are not in grace, then, will not be able to deny that it is light. And light always does good, it never does harm. It illuminates, it warms. It makes one discover the most hidden things and moves one to love them. Who can say he does not receive good from the sun? No one. More than sun, I am issuing these writings from within my heart, that they may do good to all. This is why I have so much interest that you write, because of the great good I want to do to the human family, so much so that I look upon them as my own writings, because it is always I, the one who dictates, and you are the little secretary of the long story of my will. Then I was following in the divine will everything that my sweet Jesus had done while being on earth in his humanity. And I asked in each one of his acts that his fiat be known, and that it come triumphantly to reign in the midst of creatures. And my highest and only good, moving in my interior, told me, my daughter, just as all creation is veil that hides my will, in the same way my humanity and all of my works, tears and pains, are as many veils that hide my supreme fiat. It reigned in my acts, triumphant and dominating, and it laid the foundations in order to come to reign in the human acts of creatures. But do you know who tears these veils to let it come out to dominate in her own heart? One who recognizes it in each one of my acts and invites it to come out. She tears the veil of my works. She enters into them. She recognizes the noble queen and she prays it. She presses it to no longer remain hidden, and opening her heart to it, she invites it to enter. She tears the veil of my tears, of my blood, of my pains, the veil of the sacraments, the veil of my humanity, and giving her subjection to it, she implores it to no longer remain veiled, but to make itself known as queen, which it is, in order to take its dominion and form the children of its kingdom. From here, the necessity that you go around in our volition and in all our works to find the noble queen of our will hidden in them, so as to pray it to unveil itself, to come out of its apartments, so that all may know it and let it reign. December 8th, 1927, Volume 23. One who lives in the divine will is regenerated by it, and is endowed with its goods. The Virgin, little light, became sun by virtue of the divine will. I was doing my round in the whole creation to follow all the acts that the divine fiat exercises in it. But while I was doing this, I thought to myself, I feel I cannot do without going around in the whole creation, as if I could not be without making my tiny little visits to the heavens, to the stars, to the sun, to the sea and all created things, as if an electric wire were pulling me into their midst, to sing the praises of the magnificence of so many works, and to praise and love that divine will that created them and that holds them tightly as though on the palm of its divine hand, to preserve them beautiful and fresh, just as it issued them into the light of day, and to ask for that very life and dominion that the divine Fiat has within them into the midst of creatures. Why then can I not do without? But while I was thinking of this, my beloved Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, you must know that you were born not once, but twice. The first time like the other creatures. The second time you were regenerated in my will. And since you are a birth from it, all that belongs to it is yours. And just as a father and a mother endow their daughter with their own goods, so did my divine volition, has it regenerated you, endow you with its divine properties." So who does not love? Who does not try to be amidst his properties? Who does not visit them often and form his dwelling in them in order to enjoy them, love them, and never stop singing the glory of the one who endowed him with so many vast properties that contain so many different beauties? You would be too ungrateful. To be daughter of my will and not to have your dwelling within the properties of the one who generated you would be not to love the one who gave you birth with so much love, and not to recognize the riches of the one who generated you. So this is the reason for the necessity you feel to go around in the whole creation, because it is your own thing, and the one who generated you calls you with his electric wire of light and of love to enjoy and to love what is his and yours. And he enjoys hearing you repeat your repeated refrains, "May the kingdom of your Fiat come upon earth." After this, continuing my round in all the things created by God, I paused when he created the sovereign queen, all beautiful, pure, and spotless, the new and greatest portent of all creation. And my highest good Jesus added, "My daughter, the Immaculate Mary was the little light of the human stock, because the human earth was her origin. However, she was always daughter of the light, because no stain entered into this light. But do you know where all her greatness is? Who gave her sovereignty? Who formed seas of light, of sanctity, of grace, of love, of beauty, of power, inside and outside of her? My daughter, what is human does not know how to do great things, nor give great things. So the celestial queen would have remained the little light, had she not put her will as though aside, which was the little light, and had she not let herself be invested by my divine will, dissolving her little light in it, which is not little light, but endless sun, that investing her completely, formed seas of light around her of grace, of sanctity, and embellished her so much as to render her all beautiful, with all the shades of the divine beauties, such as to enamor he who had created her. Her immaculate conception, though beautiful and pure, was always little light. It would have had neither the power nor sufficient light to be able to form seas of light and of sanctity, if our divine will had not invested the little light in order to convert it into sun, and if the little light, which was the will of the celestial sovereign lady, had not contented itself with becoming dissolved in the sun of the divine Fiat, to let itself be dominated by it. This was the great portent, the kingdom of my divine will in her. With it, everything she did became light. She nourished herself with light. Nothing came out of her that was not light, because she had the sun of my divine will in her power, which was such that she could draw from it as much light as she wanted to draw. And since the property of the light is to diffuse itself, to dominate, to fecundate, to illuminate, to warm, this is why the height of the sovereign queen, with the sun of my divine will that she possessed, diffused herself in God, and dominating him, She swayed him to descend upon earth. She became fecund of the eternal Word. She illuminated and warmed mankind. It can be said that she did everything by virtue of the kingdom of my will that she possessed. All of her other prerogatives can be called ornaments of this Mother Queen, but the substance of all her goods, of her height, beauty, greatness, and sovereignty, was that she possessed the kingdom of my will. So it is the lesser that is said about her, but not a word is spoken of the greater. This means that they know little or nothing about my will. Therefore they are almost all mute for it. December 8th, 1928, Volume 25. Why all creation celebrated the conception of the Sovereign Queen. How the Virgin awaits her daughters into her seas in order to make of them queens. The Feast of the Immaculate Conception. I was thinking, why did all creation exult with joy and celebrate so much the Immaculate Queen in her Immaculate Conception? And my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, do you want to know why? Because the divine will had the beginning of its life in the celestial tiny little girl, and therefore the beginning of all goods in all creatures. There is no good that, in my divine will, does not begin, descend, and ascend into its source. Therefore, since this celestial little girl, from her very immaculate conception, began her life in the divine Fiat, and since she was from the human stock, with my will she acquired the divine life, and with her humanity she possessed the human origin. So she had the power to unite the divine and the human, and she gave to God what man had not given him, and had denied to him, which was his will. And she gave men the right to be able to ascend to the embraces of her Creator. With the power of our Fiat that she had in her power, she bound God and men. So all creation, heaven and earth, and even hell, felt in the Immaculate Conception of this virgin little girl, just newly born in the womb of her mamma, the strength of the order that she was placing in all creation. With my will, she associated herself with all as their sister. She embraced all. She loved everything and everyone, and all longed for her, loved her, and felt honored to adore the divine will in this privileged creature. How could all creation not celebrate? In fact, up until then, man had been the disorder among all created things. No one had had the courage, the heroism, to say to his Creator, "I do not want to know my will. I give it to you as gift. I want your divine will alone as life." But this holy Virgin gave her will in order to live of the divine, and therefore all creation felt the happiness of the order that, through her, was given back to it. And the heavens, the sun, the sea, and everyone competed among themselves to honor she who, by possessing my Fiat, gave the kiss of the order to all created things. And my divine volition placed in her hand the scepter of divine queen, and surrounded her forehead with the crown of command, constituting her empress of the whole universe. Then I was feeling as though annihilated within myself. The long privations of my sweet Jesus render me as though lifeless. They have burned the little atom of my existence that, being continuously exposed to the burning rays of the sun of the divine Fiat, feels all humors being dried up within itself, and while it burns, it neither dies nor is it consumed. So I felt not only oppressed, but undone. And my sweet Jesus, as though wanting to cheer me, making himself felt in my interior, giving me a kiss, told me, "My daughter, courage, do not lose heart. On the contrary, I want you to enjoy your happy fortune, that my divine will, investing you and darting through you, takes away from you all human humors, giving you in exchange humors of divine light. Today is the feast of the Immaculate Conception. Seas of love, of beauty, of power, and of happiness overflowed from the divinity over this celestial creature. And what prevents creatures from being able to enter into these seas is the human will. What we do once, we remain in the continuous act of doing always, without ever ceasing. In the divinity, to give is its nature, with an act that never ends. Therefore these seas are still overflowing, and the Queen Mamma awaits her daughters, so as to let them live in these seas, to make of them as many little queens. However, the human will is not allowed to enter. There is no place for it, and only one who lives of divine will can have access into them. Therefore, my daughter, you can enter into the seas of my Mamma whenever you want. My divine will is your guarantor, and with it you will have free step and entrance. Even more, she awaits you. She wants you, and you will render us and her twice as happy because of your happiness. We feel happier in giving, and when the creature does not take our goods, she suffocates within us the happiness that we want to give her. Therefore I do not want you to be oppressed. Today is the greatest feast, because the divine will had life in the Queen of Heaven. It was the feast of all feasts. It was the first kiss, the first divine embrace that the creature gave to her Creator by virtue of our Fiat, that the sovereign little girl possessed, the creature sitting at table with her Creator. Therefore today is also your feast, in a special way because of the mission given to you by my divine will. So come into the seas of the Immaculate Queen to enjoy her feast and yours. I felt myself being carried outside of myself into these endless seas, but I lack the words to express what I experienced. Therefore I stop here and I move on. After this, later in the day, the confessor read in public what is written in the 15th volume about the Immaculate Conception. And my beloved Jesus, in hearing him reading, made feast in my interior and told me, "My daughter, how content I am! Today it can be said that my sovereign Mamma receives from the Church the divine honors, as she honors in her, as the first act of her life, the life of the divine will. These are the greatest honors that can be given, that the human will never had life in her, but always, always the divine will. This was the whole secret of her sanctity, of her height, power, beauty, greatness, and so on. It was my Fiat that with its heat extinguished the stain of original sin and conceived her immaculate and pure. And my Church, instead of honoring my divine will, primary cause and prime act, honored the effects of it, and proclaimed her immaculate, conceived without sin. It can be said that the Church gave her human honors, not divine honors, which she justly deserves, because a divine will had continuous life in her. And this was a sorrow for me and for her, because neither did I receive from my Church the honors of a divine will dwelling in the Queen of Heaven, nor did she receive the honors due, because she gave within herself the place in which to form the life of the supreme Fiat. Therefore today, by making known that everything in her was the prodigy of my will, and that all of her other prerogatives and privileges were in the secondary order, and as consequence of the effects of that divine will that dominated her, it can be said that today it is with decorum, divine glory, and magnificence that the feast of the Immaculate Conception is celebrated. A feast that more truly can be called the conception of the divine will in the sovereign Queen of Heaven. And this conception was the consequence of everything it is and it did, and of the great prodigies of this celestial little girl. After this, with a more tender emphasis, he added, "My daughter, how beautiful, delightful it was to see this celestial tiny little girl, even from her Immaculate Conception. One would look and would see her little earth taken from the human stock. And inside this little earth one would see the sun of our eternal volition, such that, as she was unable to contain it, it overflowed outside of her and extended, filling heaven and earth. We made a prodigy of our omnipotence so that the little earth of the tiny little queen might enclose the sun of our divine volition. So one would see earth and sun. Therefore, in everything she did, whether she thought, spoke, worked, or walked, her thoughts were rays of light, her words converted into light. Everything was light that came out of her, because since her little earth was smaller than the immense sun that she enclosed, her acts would get lost within the light. And since this little earth of the celestial sovereign was vivified, animated, and preserved continuously by the sun of my Fiat, it appeared always flowery, but with the most beautiful flowerings that turned into most sweet fruits, such as to draw our divine gazes and make us remain enraptured, but so much that we could not do without looking at her, so great was the beauty and the happiness she gave us. How beautiful was the Immaculate little Virgin! Her beauty was enchanting and enrapturing. It is enough to say that she was a prodigy of our will, to say everything. Oh, if creatures knew what it means to live of will of God, they would lay down their lives to know it and live in it. December 8th, 1931, Volume 30, The Queen of Heaven, Withdrawer of the Good Acts of Creatures into Her Seas of Graces. The Immutability of God and the Mutability of the Creature. I continue my abandonment in the divine Fiat. Its sweet chains clasp me so tightly, but not so as to take the freedom away from me. No, but to render me more free in the divine fields, and to keep me defended from everyone and from everything. So I feel safer enchained by the divine will. And while I was doing my acts in it, I felt the need of my celestial mamma, for her to help me and to sustain my little acts, so that they might encounter the divine satisfaction and smile. And the celestial consoler, who is unable to deny me anything when it is about pleasing him, visiting my poor soul, told me, "My daughter, our celestial mamma holds primacy over all the good acts of creatures. She, as queen, has the mandate and the right to make the withdrawal of all their acts into her acts. Her love of queen and of mother is so great that as the creature disposes herself to form her act of love, from the height of her throne she makes a ray of her love descend. She invests and surrounds their act of love to place in them from her own as prime love. And as it is formed, she takes it up within her same ray of love into the font of her love, and she says to her Creator, 'Adorable Majesty, in my love that always springs for you, There is the love of my children fused within my own, that I, with right of queen, have withdrawn into my sea of love, so that you may find in my own the love of all creatures. If they adore, if they pray, if they repair, if they suffer, from the height of her throne descend the ray of the adoration, the ray of her prayer, the ray of her reparation. She unleashes the vivifying ray from within the sea of her sorrows, and she invests and surrounds the adoration, the prayer, the reparation, the sufferings of creatures. And when they have done and formed the act, the same ray of light takes them up unto her throne, and they fuse within the font of the seas of the adoration, of the prayer, of the reparation, of the sorrows of the celestial Mamma. And she repeats, Majesty most holy, my adoration extends in all the adorations of creatures. My prayer prays in their prayer, repairs with their reparation, and as mother, my sorrows invest and surround their pains. I will not feel myself queen if I do not run and place my prime act over all their acts, nor will I enjoy the sweetnesses of mother if I do not run to surround, help, compensate for, embellish, fortify all the acts of creatures, so that I may be able to say, the acts of my children are one with mine. I hold them in my power before God, in order to defend them, help them, and as the sure pledge that they will reach me in heaven. Therefore, my daughter, you are never alone in your acts. You have the celestial Mamma together with you, who not only surrounds you, but nourishes your acts with her light of her virtues, to give it life. In fact, you must know that the sovereign queen, even from her Immaculate Conception, was the first and only creature who formed the link of connection between Creator and the creature, broken by Adam. She accepted the divine mandate to bind God and men, and she bound them with her prime acts of fidelity, of sacrifice, of heroism, of making her will die in each of her acts, not once, but always, to make that of God live again. From this sprang forth a font of divine love that cemented God and man in all their acts. So her acts, her maternal love, her dominion of queen, are cement that runs, that cements the acts of the creatures to render them inseparable from her own, unless someone, ungrateful, would refuse to receive the cement of the love of his Mamma. Therefore you must be convinced that around your patience there is the patience of the Queen Mamma that surrounds, sustains, and nourishes yours. Around your pains, her sorrows surround you, sustaining and nourishing, like balsamic oil, the hardness of your pains. In sum, in everything she is the queen, all-doer, who is unable to remain idle upon her throne of glory, but descends, runs as mother into the acts and needs of her children. Therefore thank her for her many maternal cares, and thank God who has given to all generations a mother so holy, lovable, and who loves so much as to reach the point of acting as the withdrawer of all their acts in order to cover them with her own, and to compensate for what is lacking in them of beauty and of goodness. Then I continued my usual round in the created things, to follow what the divine will had done in creation. And oh, how beautiful and enchanting it seemed to me! Every single time I go around in it, I find surprises that enrapture me, new things that I had not understood before, the ancient and new love of God that never changes. But while my mind wandered within the horizons of creation, my lovable Jesus, surprising me, added, "My little daughter of my will, how beautiful are our works, aren't they? Everything is solidity, perfect balance, immutability that is not subject to change, nor can it mutate. See then, all creation tells and reveals our divine being, our solidity in our works. Our balance is universal in all things, and no matter how many things may happen, whether pleasing or displeasing, our immutability is always at its place of honor. We have changed nothing of the way it was created, and if the creature sees and feels many various changes, she is the one who changes, who mutates at every circumstance. And since this changing is inside and outside of herself, she feels as if our works were changing for her. These are her own changes that surround her, that have the power to move her away from our immutability. Everything is continued and balanced in us. What we did in creation still continues. And since everything was made for those who would live in our will, as the creature places herself in order with it, our creative work carries out its continued act in her, and she feels the life of our immutability, the perfect balance of our works, our love that loves her always without ever ceasing. There where we find our will, we continue the work of our creation, not because our work is interrupted, because our will is not done. No, no, there is no danger. It is because the purpose for which they were created, which is that of doing our will, is missing in them, and therefore they have no eyes to look at our perfect balance, which is above them, to balance their works and render them immutable together with our immutability, nor ears to hear what our works say, nor hands to touch them and receive our continued love that we hold out to them. Therefore they themselves rendered themselves as though estranged from the house of their celestial Father, and our acts continue, do their course, but for them they remain as though suspended and without effects. December 8th, 1935, Volume 34, Prodigies of the Immaculate Conception, Communication of the Divine Rights. How God does not want to do anything without His Celestial Mother. I was doing my round in the acts of the divine will, and arriving at the act in which the omnipotent Fiat created the Immaculate Virgin, I stopped. And oh, what surprises of prodigies never heard of united together! The enchantment of the sky, of the sun, and of the whole of creation could not compare. Oh, how they remained behind the sovereign Queen! And my sweet Jesus, in seeing me so surprised, told me, "My blessed daughter, you must know that there is no beauty, nor value, nor prodigies that can compare to the Immaculate Conception of this celestial creature. My omnipotent Fiat made of her a new creation. Oh, how much more beautiful, more prodigious than the first! My divine volition in itself has neither beginning nor end, and the greatest prodigy was as if in this creature it would be reborn not once but in every instant, act, and prayer that she did. She grew, and in this growth my will multiplied its prodigies in an infinite way. The creation of the universe was created by us in an admirable way, and it is maintained by us under the empire of our creating and conserving act, without us adding anything else. On the other hand, in this Virgin, we maintain the creating, conserving, and growing act. This is the prodigy of prodigies, the life of our volition reborn in her, and its continuous growth in every act that she did. And our Fiat, in order to be born in her, pronounced itself in the act of her conception. And when this pronounces itself, our act has such sumptuousness, sublimity, height, immensity, power, that it takes everything in the net of its love. It does not set anyone aside. Everyone can take the good that our operating fiat possesses, except whoever would not want it. Our divinity, in seeing in this holy creature our will as reborn, shared its divine rights with her, in a way that she was mistress of our love, power, wisdom, and goodness, and queen of our fiat. She, by her growing act of our volition, enraptured us. She loved us so much that she arrived at loving us for everyone. She covered all creatures. She hid them in her love, and she made us feel the echo of the love of everyone and of each one. Oh, how we feel bound and as if made prisoners by the love of this most holy Virgin. More so because as she loved us, adored, prayed, operated, with the growing act of our fiat that she possessed. She enclosed her Creator in herself. As she loved us so, we felt absorbed in her without being able to resist her. So much was her power, that she dominated us, and she enclosed in herself our sacrosanct Trinity. And we loved her so much that we let her do what she wanted. Who had the heart to deny her anything? Rather, we felt happier to content her, because a soul who loves us is our happiness, because we feel the echo, the joy of our happiness in her. And one who possesses our will as life is everything for us. This is the great prodigy of the one who possesses our will as life, to feel herself participate in its same divine rights. With this she feels that her love never ends, and she has so much of it that she can love for everyone and give love to everyone. With her growing act, it never says enough to her sanctity. More so because the sovereign queen, by possessing our will as life, always had something to give us, always something to say. She always kept us occupied, and we always kept giving, and always communicating to her our loving secrets, so much so that we do nothing without her. First we feel her there with it, then we deposit it in her maternal heart, and from her heart it descends into the fortunate ones who would receive that good. In fact, there is no grace that descends over the earth, there is no sanctity that is formed, there is no sinner who is converted, there is no love that departs from our throne that is not first deposited in her heart of mother, that forms the maturation of that good, fecundates it with her love, enriches it with her graces, and, if necessary, with the virtue of her sorrows, and then she deposits it in who must receive it, in a way that the one who receives it feels the divine paternity and the maternity of her celestial mother. We can do it without her, but we do not want to. Who will have the heart of setting her aside? Our love, our infinite wisdom, our fiat itself impose over us and do not let us do anything that does not descend by her means. See, therefore, where our love arrives at for one who lives in the divine will, even to not wanting to do anything without her. She is the harmony of our infinite wisdom, that as the creation of the universe always goes around us, and as they go around fecundating the earth and maintaining the natural life of all creatures, so this new creation of the conception of the Immaculate Lady always goes around God, and God always goes around her, and they maintain the fecundity of good, they form the sanctity of souls, and the recall of creatures to God. December 8th, 1936, Volume 34. How in her conception the Queen of Heaven was conceived in the merits, in the life, in the love and sufferings of the future Redeemer, in order for the divine Word to then be conceived in her, so as to come to save the creatures. My poor mind, immersing itself in the divine fiat, found in act the conception of the Immaculate Queen. He was all in feast, and called everyone around himself, angels, saints, in order to make seen the unheard-of prodigy, the graces, the love with which he called this sublime creature from nothing, such that everyone would know and praise her as their queen and mother of all. But while I remained surprised, and I would have remained there who knows how long, if my sweet Jesus had not called me by telling me, I want to honor my celestial mother. I want to narrate the story of her Immaculate Conception. Only I can speak of it, being author of so great a prodigy. Now, my daughter, the first act of this conception was one fiat of ours, pronounced with such solemnity and with such fullness of grace as to enclose everything and everyone. We centralized everything in this conception of the Virgin. In our divine fiat, in which past and future do not exist, the incarnation of the Word was held present, and it made her conceived and incarnated in the same incarnation of me, future Redeemer. My blood, that was in act as if I myself were shedding it, continuously sprinkled her, embellished her, confirmed her, and fortified her in a divine way. But it was not enough for my love. All her acts, words, and steps were first conceived in my acts, words, and steps, and then they had life. My humanity was the refuge, the hiding place, the embodiment of this celestial creature, such that, if she loved us, her love was incarnated and conceived in my love. And oh, how she loved us! Her love enclosed everything and everyone. I can say that she loved as a God knows how to love. She had our same follies of love for us and for all creatures, and that loving one time, she loves, she always loves, without ever stopping. Her prayer was conceived in my prayer, and therefore it had an immense value, a power over our Supreme Being, and who could deny her anything? Her sufferings, her sorrows, her martyrdoms, that were so many, were first conceived in my humanity, and then she felt in herself the life of the sufferings and of the excruciating martyrdoms, all animated by a divine strength. Therefore one can say she was conceived in me. From me her life went forth. Everything that I did and suffered lined up around this holy creature in order to court her and continuously pour myself over her and be able to tell her, "You are the life of my life. You are all beautiful. You are the first redeemed. My divine fiat has molded you. It has breathed on you, and it has made you be conceived in my works, in my humanity itself. Now, my daughter, conceiving this celestial creature in the incarnate Word was done by us with highest wisdom, with unreachable power, with inexhaustible love, and with decorum that befits our works. I, Word of the Father, having to descend from heaven in order to incarnate myself in the womb of a virgin, just virginity and having made her exempt from the stain of original sin was not sufficient for the sanctity of my divinity. Therefore, it was necessary for our love and for our sanctity that this virgin first would be conceived in me with all those prerogatives, virtues, and beauties that the life of the incarnate Word must possess. And then, therefore, I could be conceived in the one who had been conceived in me. And I found in her my heaven, the sanctity of my life, my own blood that had generated her and watered her so many times. I found my own will, that communicating its divine fecundity to her, formed the life of her and the Son of God. My divine Fiat, in order to make her worthy of being able to conceive me, held her invested and under its continuous empire that possesses all acts as if they were one single act. In order to give her everything, it called into act my foreseen merits, my whole life, and it continuously poured it within her beautiful soul. Therefore, I alone can tell the true story of the Immaculate Conception and of her whole life, because I conceived her in me, and I am aware of everything. And if the Holy Church speaks about the Celestial Queen, they can only say the first letters of the alphabet about her sanctity, greatness, and gifts with which she was enriched. If you knew the contentment I feel when I speak of my Celestial Mother, who knows how many questions you would ask me to give me the joy of speaking of she whom I love so much and who has so much loved me. December 8th, 1937, Volume 35, The Conception of the Queen of Heaven, Her Race of Love. Wherever her Creator was, she was there to love him. How she remained conceived in each created thing, and was constituted as Queen of Heaven, of the Son, and of all. Today, while swimming in the divine volition, my poor mind found in action the conception of the Queen of Heaven. Oh, what wonders, what surprises! They just cannot be described. And I was thinking to myself, what else can be said about the Immaculate Conception after so much has been said already? My adorable Jesus, surprising me, all festive as if he wanted to celebrate the conception of the Celestial Queen, said, "My blessed daughter, oh, how many more things I have to say about the conception of this celestial creature. It was a life that we were creating, not a work. There is a great difference between a work and a life. Further, it was a life both divine and human, in which there had to be perfect harmony of sanctity, love, and power, such that one life had to be able to match with the other. The wonders we made in creating this life were such that we had to perform the greatest prodigy, a chain of miracles, so that this life could contain all the good that we deposited within her. This holy creature, conceived without original sin, felt the life of her Creator, his operating will that did nothing less than make new seas of love arise. Oh, how much she loved us! She could feel us inside and outside of herself. Oh, how she ran in order to be everywhere and in every place, wherever the life of her Creator was. It would have been the hardest and most cruel martyrdom for her not to have been able to be everywhere together with us, to love us. Our will gave her wings, and our life, while still being within her, made itself found everywhere, to be loved and to enjoy the one it loved so much, and who loved it in return. Now listen to another surprise. As soon as she was conceived, she started her race, and we loved her with infinite love. Not loving her would have been the greatest martyrdom for us too. So, as she ran outside to search for our life, which she already possessed within herself, since a good is never complete if it is not possessed both inside and outside, she remained conceived in heaven and in the celestial spheres, whose stars formed her crown, praising and claiming her as their queen. And she acquired the rights as queen over all the celestial spheres. Our immensity awaited her in the sun, and she ran and was conceived in the sun that, becoming diadem for her adorable head, invested her with light, and praised her as Queen of Light. Our immensity and power awaited her also in the wind, in the air, in the sea, and she ran and ran without ever stopping. So she remained conceived in the wind, in the air, and in the sea, acquiring the rights as queen over all. The sovereign lady makes her power, her love, and her maternity flow in the heaven, in the sun, in the wind, in the sea, and even in the air that everybody breathes. She was conceived everywhere, in every place and in every one. Wherever our power was, she would raise her throne to love us and to love everyone. This was the greatest miracle performed by our powerful love, to bilocate her, to multiply her in all things and in all created beings, so that we might find her everywhere and in every one. The celestial queen is like the sun. Even if someone doesn't want the light of the sun, this light imposes itself anyway and says, "Whether you want me or not, I must do my course. I must give you light." But if someone could hide from the light of the sun, nobody can hide from the sovereign lady. Otherwise she could not, in fact, be called universal queen and mother of everyone and everything. And we do not know how to speak words without making facts. Do you see then the extent of our power and our love in the conception of this holy creature? We reached the point of elevating her to such a height and glory that she can say, "Wherever my Creator is, there I am, to love him. He invested me with such power and glory that I am sovereign over all. Everything is dependent on me. My dominion reaches everywhere, to the extent that while I am conceived in all things, I keep conceived within me the sun, the wind, the sea, everything. I possess everything in me, even my Creator, and I am the sovereign and the owner of all. This is all of my unreachable height, my glory that nobody can equal, and my great honor. With my love I embrace all, I love all, and I belong to all. I am the mother of my Creator. December 8th, 1938, Volume 36. How the humanity of our Lord served as a veil for his divinity and for the prodigies of the divine volition. How all created things and the very creature are veils that hide the divinity. The Immaculate Conception and the new birth of all. My flight in the divine will continues. It seems to me that it can be found in all things, natural and spiritual, saying with unspeakable love, "I am here. Let's act together. Do not do it by yourself. Without me you wouldn't know how to do it the way I would. I would remain with the pain of having been put aside, while you would remain with the sorrow of not having in your acts the value of one single act of a divine will." While I was thinking this, my sweet Jesus, repeating his short little visit, all goodness told me, "My blessed daughter, my most holy humanity was the depository of my divine will. There was no act, little or great, even the breathing and the motion, that my humanity, like a veil, did not hide completely in my divine fiat. Even more, I would not have been capable of a breath or a movement if I did not enclose it within me. Therefore my humanity served as the veil in which to hide my divinity, as well as the great prodigy of the work of my will in all my acts. Otherwise, no one could have come close to me. my majesty and the shining light of my divinity would have eclipsed him and would have just floored him. All would have run away from me. Who would have dared to cause me the smallest pain? But I loved the creature, and I came on earth not to show off my divinity, but my love. So I wanted to hide myself inside the veil of my humanity, to get acquainted with man, to do what he did, reaching the point of letting him give me unheard of pains and even death. The soul that unites with my humanity in all her acts and pains, by wanting to find my will and make it her own, breaks the veil of my humanity, finding in my acts the fruit, the life, the prodigies that my humanity did within me, and receiving all that I did within me as her own life. My humanity will serve to help and guide her, showing her how to live within it. In this way I will still be on earth, continuing to be the veil, hiding what my will wants to do. But if creatures will look for me without my will, they will find only my veil, not the life of my will. They will not be able to produce the prodigies that it operated in the hiding place of my humanity. It is always my will that knows how to place inside the creature the greatest prodigies, the brightest suns, wonders never before seen, as if inside each of my humanities on earth. But alas, I search them and I cannot find them, because no one, in total firmness, is looking for my will. Then dear Jesus kept silent. I remained thinking of what he had just said, and I could really see how everything Jesus had done and suffered became bearer of the divine volition. Then he continued, "My good daughter, it wasn't only my humanity that, though in a more special way, was hiding my divinity and my will. All created things and the very creatures are veils that hide our divinity and our adorable will. Even heaven is a veil that hides our immense divinity, our firmness and immutability, while the variety of stars hides the multiple effects that our immensity, firmness, and immutability possess. Oh, if man could see our divinity revealed under that blue vault, without the veil of that blue that covers us and hides us, his littleness would remain crushed under our majesty. He would walk trembling, feeling continuously upon him the gaze of a pure, holy, strong, and powerful God. But since we love man, we veil ourselves, lending ourselves secretly to all that is needed. The sun is the veil that hides our shining majesty. We must perform a miracle to restrain our uncreated light so as not to scare the creature. Veiled by this light created by us, we approach the creature, kissing her and warming her. We lay this veil of light even under her steps, on the right, on the left, under her head. We even fill her eye with light, and who knows, maybe the frail pupil of her eye will recognize us. But no, in vain. She takes only the veil of light that hides us, and we remain the unknown God in the middle of the creatures. What pain! The wind, too, is a veil that hides our empire. The air is a veil hiding our life that continuously gives to the creatures. The sea is a veil that hides our purity, our refreshments and divine freshness. Its murmuring hides our continuous love, and when we see we are not listened to, we even storm in huge waves so as to be recognized and loved. For every good that man receives, our life is hidden inside, offering that good to him. Our divinity loves man so much that it even hides inside the earth, making it firm and stable under his steps, not allowing him to vacillate. Even in the singing bird, in the flowered fields, in the various sweetnesses of the fruits, our joys, to make him taste the innocent delights of our divine being. And how much more could I tell you about the many prodigies of love by which we are veiled and hidden inside man? We veil ourselves in the breathing, in the heartbeat, in the motion, in the memory, in the intellect, in the will. We veil ourselves in the pupil of his eyes, in his word, in his love. And oh, how painful it is not to be recognized or loved. We can say that we live in him, we carry him, and we let ourselves be carried by him. He could do nothing without us, but still we live together without knowing each other. What pain! If only he knew us. The life of man was supposed to be the first, the greatest prodigy of our love and omnipotence. We had only to offer him from within its veils our sanctity and our love, covering him with our beauty, making him enjoy our delights. But since he does not recognize us, he keeps us like the faraway God, away from himself. If we are not recognized, we cannot give our goods to the blind. He is forced to live under the nightmare of his own miseries and passions. Poor man who does not recognize us, either in the veils that hide us within him, or in the veils of each created thing. He just keeps running away from our life, and from the scope for which he was created. So many times when we cannot tolerate his ingratitude, the very goods contained in our veils are turned into chastisement for him. Therefore, do recognize that you are nothing other than a veil hiding your Creator, in order for you to receive, and for us to administer, our divine life in all your acts. Recognize it in the veils of all created things, so that all may help you to receive a good so great. After this, I was doing my round in the acts of the divine volition. How many surprises in this will so holy! It is this will that most awaits the creature, keeping her aware of all its works, letting her know how much it loves her, and offering her everything it does. It fidgets to give without ceasing, and it is content with a little "I love you" from the creature in return. Then I arrived at the conception of my mother and queen. How many wonders! And my sweet Jesus continued, "My blessed daughter, today is the feast of the Immaculate Conception. It is the most beautiful feast, the greatest one for us, for heaven and for earth. In the act of creating this celestial creature from nothing, we made such prodigies and wonders that the heavens and the earth remained completely filled. We called everyone. Nobody was put aside, so that all could be reborn together with her. It was the new birth of everyone and everything. Our divine being overflowed so much that in the act of her conception, we put at her disposal seas of love, of sanctity and light, with which she could love all, make saints of all, and give light to all. The celestial little one felt an innumerable population being reborn in her little heart. And what did our paternal goodness do? First, we donated her to ourselves, so that we could delight and court her, and she could delight and court us. Then we donated her to every creature. Oh, how much she loved us, and loved all, with such intensity and fullness that there is no point in which her love does not arise. The whole creation, the sun, the wind, the sea, are filled with the love of this holy creature, because they too felt reborn with her to new glory. They even had the great glory of possessing their queen, to the extent that when she prays to us for the good of her people, with a love that we cannot resist, she says, "Adorable Majesty, remember that you offered me. I am yours, and I am theirs too. so by right you must grant what I ask. End of December 8th. Fiat.